Okay, so this video is a quick review of the Dylann Roof case. I just want to point out that Dylann Roof has effectively neutralized any and all arguments against the need to improve gun control regulations in this country, and I will point out exactly how and why that has happened. Dylann Roof, as you may or may not know, is the young South Carolinian who decided he wanted to, a young white boy who decided he wanted to start a race war in the United States. He decided he was going to buy a handgun, walk into a church. He methodically picked churches in his state for maximum impact, walked into a black church, came into a prayer meeting, was greeted by the deacons of the church, and welcomed with open arms to sit in the church prayer meeting. And while everyone was sitting there in the prayer meeting, he pulled out a 45 caliber automatic pistol and shot 9 black men in cold blood while they were praying to God in a house of the Lord. And this young man, aside from his issues with blacks or his apparent solution to the racial issues in the United States, let's just talk about the technical issues of what actually happened. This young man apparently had a drug conviction on his record. He apparently, I'm not sure exactly what the details are, but a drug conviction in federal law is enough to make it a felony to even apply for a firearm, to purchase a firearm in the United States, much less to actually either have a firearm or to have ammunition in your possession. It is a federal felony if you are a known drug user under the current federal gun laws to have a firearm or ammunition, not to mention explosive, but that's a side point. So it turns out he walked into a gun store, a legal gun store, registered gun store in South Carolina, and applied for this pistol. There's a 3-day mandatory waiting period in South Carolina, according to South Carolina law. So the gun shop made him wait, or he waited 5 days, came back 2 days later after the 3-day mandatory waiting period, picked up his firearm, and walked out of the store. Now, somewhere in the equation here is the NICS check. There's supposed to be a NICS instant background check for every legal firearm purchase over the counter in the United States of America. The NICS check was not only not instant, it also was not even done for another 2 weeks. His NICS check results came back after he'd already assassinated 9 innocent black men in church. 12 days after that, his check came back, and apparently he passed the check because whoever did the check didn't actually check his state record and didn't pick up his drug conviction. So there's a certain point here where we all talk about, the gun control situation in the United States is a real problem. Things are out of control. Too many people are getting shot, blah, 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 blah. This case is probably not an isolated case. I would guess that there are plenty of people in South Carolina or other states, especially in the South or in the West, in these gun-happy states, where people have walked into a gun shop or walked into a gun show, certainly with the gun show loophole, and purchased a firearm who legally are not able to own firearms, for whom the same restrictions would have applied. I would like to say to anybody and everybody out there, think about this yourself. How many times have you sold a gun or know somebody who's bought a gun who used drugs? Who's ever used drugs? Who's a known drug user or has a drug conviction on their record? Has any misdemeanor conviction on their record which would bar them from buying a handgun legally? And by that, I mean any misdemeanor conviction which is punishable by a jail sentence of a year. 1 year is all it takes. So you're talking about a class 2 or class 3 misdemeanor. How many people do you know who are not legally able to own a handgun under federal law, who you know own handguns, and you have done nothing about it? You have said nothing to anyone about it. You have done nothing to anyone about it. That makes you a collaborator with anything they do with that handgun, not to mention the fact that they are carrying a handgun, in possession of a handgun or ammunition illegally. It's not just the people who shoot people that are the problem. It's also the people who know the guy who shoots people, who know he has a handgun, and who know he either is about to commit a crime or is guilty of committing a crime simply in owning the gun. Who are the problem? It's the people who sit back and watch that are as much the problem as anything else. So I can only say this: when you talk about how we have enough gun regulations in this country, how the only problem is actually enforcing the gun regulations, that's a bunch of nonsense. It's not just about enforcing the regulations about guns. It's also about enforcing the regulations on reporting. If you know somebody who shouldn't have a firearm, who does have a firearm, who has a firearm illegally, and you don't report it, that makes you a collaborator to their crimes. It's a enforcement issue all around, not just for the people who do the shooting. It's also for the bystanders. But not only is it an enforcement issue, it's a clear issue of we do need additional regulation. There's something wrong when so many people can violate federal handgun law, state handgun law, and get away with it for so long. There's something wrong when somebody walks into a gun shop and buys a handgun across the counter who should not have bought that handgun and walks out of that out of that shop with a handgun and ammunition, despite the fact that he's violating federal law. Somebody has sent him that gun or given him that gun and relied on some other law to stop the purchase when that other law failed. So obviously we need more laws. It's a simple case. We can't have all these people do all this shooting and get all these guns and commit all these crimes and say that we don't need more laws, that the only problem is enforcing the laws we have in the books. Obviously, we cannot enforce the laws that are on the books sufficient enough to stop these shootings. That's one problem. Second problem is, like any law, it only takes effect after the law has been violated. Okay? So if you want to stop somebody from shooting somebody illegally, right, you need to have a law which would have stopped them before they shot them illegally. And to say, okay, we're going to rely on federal law is fine as long as everybody actually obeys federal law. So if they don't obey the federal law, what are you going to do? You need to have other laws that will make these people actually say, if I violate this law, I am going to be personally held responsible for this guy getting a firearm. Okay? It's just not enough to say that the solution is to enforce existing law and that therefore people who contribute to the situation are not culpable for the problem. They are culpable for the problem, and we need to have more laws that bring more responsibility, more legal consequences onto the people who assist these people in getting and keeping and carrying firearms before they use them illegally on innocent people. That is an absolute necessity. And as long as our society is ducking and weaving and trying to say it's not their fault, it's not my fault, it's not their fault, I didn't have anything to do with it, I obeyed the law, blah, 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 yet people are still getting shot, then you are looking at people who are in denial. There's no question about that. You are in simple denial if you contribute to someone else getting shot, but think you didn't have anything to do with it and there's no additional laws that need to be passed. You clearly had something to do with it, but you think that what you did was perfectly legal. That is what we need to change. We need to change the attitude and the perception that handing potential criminals threats to society, loaded firearms or ammunition and firearms, these things are designed to kill people, and people who deal with handguns know this very well. They're designed to shoot and kill people, quote unquote, in self-defense, but certainly they're going to shoot and kill people. Okay? We need to pass more laws to make it harder for certain people to get firearms. We need to pass more laws to make it easier to remove firearms from the hands of certain people. Not sit back and say, oh, I've done everything legal, I'm not responsible. There's a breakdown in logic in this chain.